And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage. And you're joining us on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Diana Wu David, who is talking to us today from Hong Kong. She's the author of Future Proof Reinventing Work in the Age of Acceleration, which is a book about how to adopt more agile mindsets and practices to prepare yourself for success in a fast changing world across a 100-year life. Diana is an adjunct professor of leadership at Columbia Business School's EMBA Global Asia and for the Financial Times Non-Executive Director Diploma. She's a former Financial Times exec. She now works with CEOs and board of directors to enhance their leadership agility, influence, collaboration, and resilience. She's got world-renowned clients such as the Mandarin Oriental Hotel Group, the World Bank, Asia Development Bank, and Credit Suisse. And a very cool fact or factoid is she began her career in and leadership education as an assistant to Dr. Henry Kissinger. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Peter. Great to be with you.
Great. So you've got lots of different threads here, right? So there's sort of the executive education piece, there's speaking, there's writing. From my experience, nobody sort of plans for it to come out exactly this way, right? So how do all these pieces fit together in your world?
I think that that's not so different than perhaps my career itself, but first of all, I was at Financial Times and launched our board leadership program, and then a lot of these little threads came through because of conversations that I had. So, to begin with, we did a 6-month diploma, and so many of the senior leaders that were going through to train to be more effective independent board directors would ask questions like, I don't really know what I want to do when I grow up. I'm retiring. I've spent 30 years in
Now what?
uh, yeah, it was sort of a now what. And I thought, okay, well, I don't know myself, but I'm I guess connectually intelligent, somebody said. I don't exactly have a lot of my own innate intelligence, but I know where to get it. And so I
So it's
think
like
that
the
certainly
secondhand smoke of intelligence, is that it?
I guess so. I
Okay.
gotta figure out a better metaphor than that, but
Yeah,
um, certainly, I think that a lot of it is, it's customer needs, right? So if you have somebody that asks you to solve a problem for them, then my instinct is to go out and do that. So in terms of um, the book, that's definitely, a lot of people saying, so now what? The future of work makes me feel like, everything's going really fast and accelerating, and I'm
sure.
going to live to be 100. And so what do I do? So doing research on something I love anyway, the future of work, and then combining it with a lot of conversations like you do on the podcast with people who sound like they seem to be doing things well, was the genesis. And as you know, because that's your business, there is a huge circular, effect in terms of the content that you generate and then how that
So
goes
let's
into
talk
your
about that.
speaking and
Yeah.
teaching and everything.
So let's talk about that because I like the way you frame that sort of the circular effect of content generation. So research is but one way to potentially generate content. Working with actual clients on real engagement, help you generate content. Speaking, writing a book. So how do you know the when you're generating content that is of value? Meaning, like, okay, that's interesting. That can be a consulting line, or that should be a book. Versus interesting, but not particularly something that would be, critically important to you on the business side of your business.
Well, I think and I actually wrote about this in the Future Proof book that having spent so many decades as an innovator, starting my own companies, and also within corporates, it's the minimum viable, product or project where you put something out there and you see how people react. And if it seems like everybody's really excited, then you're on to something, and maybe you need to tweak it a little bit.
So
And
I want to
sometimes you,
pause you there for a second because I
yep.
think you went through that fairly quickly, but I think it's critically important. So oftentimes, I'll see somebody or a potential client will come to me and say, "Oh, I have this book that's coming out." And a book is not by any stretch of the imagination a minimum viable product, right? Writing 60,000 words and committing so that is the opposite. It's maximum potentially unviable, not product, right? And so I'll ask them some questions in terms of, well, where have you tested this concept and where who have you talked to about this? And they're like, the wise ones can give you really thorough answers of, well, it started as a speech and then I did, and they can give you the whole journey of how it started as a
Yeah.
kernel and then they've nurtured it and whatever. The ones that may be a little myopic or whatever, pick a word, said, no, 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 I didn't talk to anybody. I just know this is really good. And I've spent, the last 3,000 hours of my life focused on this thing. And then you put it out there and it's like thump, nothing. So talk about the application of minimum viable product for thought leaders, because I am constantly encouraging folks to do that. And I think some of it is they're perfectionists; they need to take something all the way. But how do you do that? Can you give us some tactics?
And I completely get it because it's not the easiest thing to do, especially if you have been brought up in a sort of corporate environment
Yeah.
that's not the way that we do things. So it's a new muscle. So I think that just, being able to scope something and, for instance, for books, and I'd love to say that I spent a lot of time writing blogs, for instance, 100 blogs and everybody loved them, and so I took the top 50 and made the book proposal or something. I didn't do that,
Okay.
but I am very active on social media. It was really the in-person aspect,
Okay.
that made me think, it was sort of the 80 coffees, like, I can't possibly have another coffee. I need to write a book. I like so I can just put it in the mail the next time somebody says, asks the same question. So,
Okay, but for you, so for some it might be if they have a platform, throw some things out of blogs, see what resonates, and then you could forensically stitch your
yeah.
top 50 together. So you did it sort of in person, but what were the common threads or uncommon threads amongst the 80 coffees that you had? Not the actual caffeine, but the people that you had them with.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, first of all, it came from a group of people that were all looking at their maybe second or third act. So there was a
Okay,
demographic profile there,
sure.
and the common thread was success. I think that all of them were very much successful, but maybe either a little dissatisfied
Okay.
or just in a quandary. And so there is a certain amount of a common thread in that they are thinking about very specific things. Should I host a podcast? Should I write a book? Should I start blogging? There's a lot of things that people start thinking about.
So I want to just sort of replay that. So you've got sort of a common, not identical demographic, right? Successful people, second or third act, starting to look forward, thinking about it, and you're getting the same questions over and over again. So that tells you that there's potentially a there, right? If one person said, "Hey, I want to be a blogger," that's interesting, but it's not that's an outlier. But you're starting to see
Yeah.
and hear patterns. Good. Okay. Good. Good. What else?
And I think from my perspective, I think that the way to test things, or the way that I like to test things because it's immediate, is doing some kind of in-person workshop, or even putting together a breakfast around a
Okay.
topic and seeing who shows up and what they think about it. So that I find is really useful, gathering basically market intelligence.
And are the people that you're gathering, so and I think this is potentially an important point. I think it's critical when you're creating content, be that for a book, be that for a speech, be that for your platform, that you really know who your market is, right? And you know that as much like laser accuracy as you can. So I'm assuming the people that you talk to are representative of the client avatars that you'd like to serve.
Well, yes, absolutely. Although I don't know that I had exactly that, because a lot of the future of work and individual agility and personal development was interesting to me. But the other thing I did was surveys. I
Okay,
actually sent out emails to ask people open-ended questions. What is the thing that keeps you up at night about the
great.
future of work? And I included corporate HR people in that, and other people that fit the demographic, and actually a number of people, to see what it was that they were worried about. And you're right about the demographic, though, because I know the people that I serve, but I still have a lot of people who might show up to an event, and
That are outside of the core demographic, right?
they're outside of the core. Yeah.
So could you give maybe a specific example, and the book might be one, and whatever, of where an idea started off this way, sort of this minimum viable product way. You tested it, you got validation, which gave you the confidence to invest more time and energy into it. One that had a good outcome, and one that it fizzled out early. Like, hey, I thought this was a great idea. Talked to a bunch of people, and not so much.
Yeah, I think that the when I was at Financial Times, I was sort of a corporate entrepreneur. So the board director program that we did had every possibility of failure, and
Okay,
as do all projects. I mean that's
sure.
what entrepreneurs do.
Some of them all at once, right?
And I also invest in early stage startups, and I've had loads of failures in that respect. But the board director program is something we thought, Does anybody want this here?" There's 60% of the Hong Kong Stock Exchange is held by family companies who really don't want independent board directors. So, is there a market after the course? And so that was an example, was sort of the first example in this demographic of, wow, yeah, well, let's try this. And that actually we just we didn't not much of a minimum viable product. We had something in the UK and went out with a 6-month diploma that was went through regulation through the Education Bureau and everything. And that is actually it was a success, but I learned my lesson actually. I thought, why didn't we even do like a half day workshop at least or something? Um, that was really putting the, cart before the horse.
Sure.
Um, but other things that I've done have absolutely failed. And I think that it's usually a conversation about putting together some small aspect and trying to sell it uh, as what it is, and then having it be something that's not that interesting.
Got it.
And I think, from my perspective, you need to have a couple of those going on. And yes,
Sure.
maybe they all fail, but sometimes some of the ones you don't expect might surprise you.
No, and failure is good. I mean, failure just means that
Oh yeah.
it's better to fail early than later on when you've invested more. So now, okay, so you've got a great idea. You've talking to you've spoken to and gotten feedback from the target audience. You validated the research. It's okay. This is a thing. How do you then, and this is probably the $1 zillion question, move from sort of the research stage, the intellectual, the academic to okay, I have to monetize this. Like, how do I make a living with this?
Yeah, I think, well, clearly I'm not the person asked because I just wrote a book. That was my decision.
Right, right.
But certainly, um, from the perspective of, what does my audience need, and in what way do they need it? What way would be most useful to them? And therefore, they will pay for it. I think is one of the ideas. And I spent most of my career sort of looking at different channels, and I grew up in media. So I think that's an asset for a thought leader. You think about, did people want to write a book? Who wants to write a book? And that's at a certain level of engagement, say. But a lot of people said that was great, but what's next? I feel like that's an impetus for me to develop new products or new ways to engage. So I've started putting it into an online course
Okay.
because people want more support. I think they want more hand holding. So being able to take that small concept and say, okay, this has legs. And I think for me, actually, before the book as well, I did a TED talk that was one of the experiments, I guess, ended up being a very big surprise because it was quite personal, but it turned into my corporate speaking career. It was about resilience, and all of a sudden, banks were calling me to have me speak at their conferences or to their staff. And that's when I realized that there's a corporate angle there, and I can monetize that through the workshops that I do. And there's an online course aspect that in the initial ideas is going to be very personal
Sure.
for people to take them through their future proof journey. So
I want to go back to the TED Talk. So there's lots of
yeah.
reasons folks do TED Talks, but I think a lot of it is strategic and calculated, and a lot of it is serendipitous, right? So if you look at, probably one of the most successful folks that launched off of TED would I would say maybe Brene Brown, right, or
Yep.
Simon Sinek or something, where it wasn't planned. It was, you can tell the footage is a little grainy. It's just they're real,
Yeah.
they're authentic, it's from the heart, and there was some courage to put, for Brene to put out that vulnerability stuff out there that
Mm.
wasn't necessarily her thing back then, 10, 12 years ago. So you put it out there and you said, it was personal. It put you a little vulnerable, so it took some courage. But then the market, and this sounds like it surprised you, said we'd like some of that. So how do you make sure that you're actually listening to the market? Because at the end of the day, it's the market that's going to win, the market that's going to tell you where to go. So how do you know you're listening to the market?
How do I know I guess it was a surprise to me. I guess I just wasn't aware. I don't, there's a lot of different markets you can listen to. So it didn't occur to me that the TED Talk would be interesting to corporate HR people or corporate CEOs.
So what was the box that you put the TED Talk in when you were doing it? Like, this is
Oh,
just a
for
thing. Like,
me.
I'm just
Do you know,
what's that?
actually, it was for me, it was storytelling. I thought,
Okay.
I've been on stage. I don't have a problem with that, but I've never it's always been about board behavior, corporate governance, or sales or whatever. It's business.
That's sort of a
um,
role. It's not a
yeah.
personal. Yeah,
Yep.
right. That's your
Didn't
expertise.
didn't put a lot of myself in there. So for the TED Talk, it did. It came up. It was sort of serendipitous. And I thought, you know what? I don't know how to do that at all. This could be really interesting. Let's give it a roll of the dice. And I didn't anticipate that it would be so personal, but it became that. And I thought it would be helpful for other people. And so I listened to the market because there were 2,000 people, I think, in the audience. And, for some people said, that is exactly what the people in our company need to hear. And so it just was part of, I think, a shift that I didn't know was happening, quite frankly. I didn't realize that people in big corporates were struggling with resilience and that they were willing to get that personal.
So the lesson there could be, if you're struggling with something, there's a chance, although it's not 100%, that others might be struggling from the same thing as well. And particularly if it's something where you need to be a little bit more vulnerable,
Yeah.
that if you have the courage to put yourself out there, you're actually sort of lighting up a crowd saying that will lean into that. And then you have the opportunity to respond to that and potentially commercialize it or whatever, because that wasn't part of the master plan, right? But it just, there's a time for strategy and there's a time to listen to the market.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the writing the book has been similar. It was something that I anticipated very much for a personal audience. I made that decision. And I think that it's been well received in that regard, but it's also been something where people have come and asked me to be part of thought leadership related to disrupting aging and multi-generational workforce and a lot of more high-level policy and workplace transformation conversations than I anticipated, but I'm really excited about it. I think that those are interesting things, and I've spent enough time in a company and in policy work that it could be fun.
Sure. Well, this has been great. As we start to wind down here, any last words of wisdom, either things that folks should embrace or things that they should avoid? Any thoughts on that?
I think that for people who are considering what they want to do in terms of their thought leadership, it does pay to be strategic, and it pays to think about the customer. I mean, I have a picture actually on my desk of somebody that I know who is the person I always think of that, I'm doing this for that person. What would they like? And I find that that's really useful to humanize it a little bit rather than start, this crazy thinking about, oh, I could do this, I could do that. I'm not really sure. Do I have time? Think about the person that you're serving and how they might feel and react to that, and then test it. That would
But I
just
like the
be my
personalization side of that, not some, women over 40 with this level of education. Like, make it personal, be able to see them, right?
Absolutely.
So
Have an
great.
avatar.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Avatar. So this has been awesome. I appreciate all that you've shared with us, and I think there's a lot that folks can learn from what you've done in your journey. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us today.
Thank you, Peter. It was a pleasure to speak to you.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.